Monuments. They're how societies tell their story to the world. The legacy of all human civilizations are told through the use of monuments and memorials. A 2007 report by the United States Peace Institute states that monuments are tools of memorialization used to repair societies that are emerging from a violent conflict. Now, they can be used in multiple ways, but the most common use of monuments in public spaces today is to facilitate healing, unification, and to honor those who suffered or died during the violent conflict. Now, monuments permeate the fabric of our everyday lives. They're the landmarks in our city centers. They are the centerpieces at our most beloved public parks that we take our children to play in. Monuments craft our subconscious interpretation of the communities that they're built in. Now, my family and I, we're a military family, 21 years to be exact, and we've had the opportunity to travel and live all over the world. Well, in 2009, the military sent us to South Korea. We were stationed at a small base about 25 miles north of Seoul. So in that area, there was no military housing. We lived right in the Korean community. We used their public transportation, we shopped at their stores. We really immersed ourselves in the Korean society. Now, South Korea, like most Asian and European nations, have a much longer recorded history than that of the United States. But just like the US, they have historic sites and monuments in their communities for their citizens as well as visitors to enjoy. Now, Korea itself has some of the grandest monuments you will ever see. There's this sprawling metropolis filled with skyscrapers, bridges, cars, traffic. And you might be walking down the street and all that hustle and bustle and turn a corner and it opens up to a vast, massive 300-acre square with granite paved sidewalks and a 100-foot bronze monument of a Korean emperor who ruled thousands of years before the US was even a thought. My time living in Asia showed me that monuments are how civilizations tell their story after they're long gone. Well, while we were living in South Korea, we had the opportunity to travel to China, and we took a tour of Tiananmen Square. Now, some of you may be old enough to remember the 1989 student protests where hundreds, maybe thousands, are reported to have been killed as they protested against the Chinese government. Now, I was pretty young back then, but I can still remember this iconic image of the man who stood in Tiananmen Square in front of the military tank. Wow. Well, there I was, as an adult, standing at the very spot of Tank Man. I actually thought about Tank Man at that time, and I wonder where he was. What about the families of the victims who died that day at the hands of their own government? I was surrounded by thousands of other visitors in the sight of what could be considered the most significant conflict in China's recent history. It gave me a sense that perhaps this was China's way of righting a wrong, for asking for forgiveness from the world, from their citizens, and honoring the victims. And even as a visitor, I was deeply, deeply moved. This changed how I traveled internationally and what I felt about other societies and communities. So when we went to Frankfurt, Germany, some years later, of course, we sought out their historic sites and monuments. We're a military family, so we're looking for the war memorials. I wondered, how had Germany memorialized World War II? Well, if you're looking for any museums or monuments dedicated to Nazi Germany or the Third Reich, they don't exist. If you're looking for effigies or statues erected in the likeness of Adolf Hitler, there are none. There are no souvenir-sized Nazi flags for purchase. No t-shirts or shot glasses inscribed with swastikas. You see, what I found was that shortly after World War II, Germany outlawed everything related to the Nazi Party and the Third Reich. They even changed their national flag. In fact, most of the world isn't even familiar with the term the Third Reich. What we are familiar with is the number 6 million. 6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust. And in similar fashion to Tiananmen Square, the only structures that remain standing from the war are the most notorious concentration camps. You see, Germany has created a legacy where they honor the victims of their darkest and most dreary domestic conflict. Well, it was after our trip to Germany and living abroad in Asia when the military sent us to the South, Georgia, to be exact. And so we have this tradition in our family where we spend the entire first year in a new city, touring the entire area, just like we're tourists. And so we set out, of course, married to a soldier, we're looking for war memorials and soldier memorials and monuments. Well, we found Revolutionary War monuments. We found Korean War and Vietnam War monuments. Of course, we found World War II and some Holocaust monuments and memorials. But when we set out in search of American Civil War monuments, what we found confused us. The story that was being told by those monuments left us perplexed. We Googled American Civil War monuments, and our search results came back segregated. Union soldier Civil War monuments and Confederate monuments. Now, this hit us like a ton of bricks. You see, unlike every other violent conflict in American history, the Civil War monuments don't reflect our sentiment as a unified nation, that perspective that we hold so dear. But they instead memorialize the cause of the war, the opposition, the conflict, the very thing that we now hold so dear as a unified nation. The one thing that threatened that is what we are honoring on our Civil War monuments. I thought to myself, wow, how did it feel gazing up and staring at the monuments in South Korea, Germany, and China, and the sense of pride that I got knowing that those nations had honored the victims of their violent conflicts. And I wondered if we are missing the opportunity to tell the story of who we really are as the United States of America. Those of us alive today, we get to decide the story that we tell about our young nation. And as we design our legacy, it is important to consider not only the story that we're telling the world, but also the story that we are telling ourselves. Thank you.